The blonde pilot who ejected while her co-pilot died was called a coward who abandoned her wingman. But when they saw the secret tattoo hidden under her flight suit, her new squadron discovered they had been tormenting someone who tried to die, saving her partner. Hey everyone, welcome back to Stories of General Dave. I'm about to tell you a story that will completely shatter your assumptions about survival, sacrifice, and the cruel judgments we make about people in their darkest moments. This isn't just about a female pilot facing military sexism. This is about how trauma can be weaponized against the very people who suffered the most. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button right now, because this story will show you that sometimes surviving is the cruelest punishment of all. Before we dive in, I want to connect with my audience. Write in the comments how old you are and what city you're from. I love hearing from viewers around the world. First Lieutenant Rebecca Blaze Thompson had been the target of whispers and cold shoulders at Edwards Air Force Base in California for 6 months. The 26-year-old pilot with platinum blonde hair and piercing blue eyes looked like she belonged in a Hollywood movie about fighter pilots, but her fellow aviators treated her like a disease they didn't want to catch. According to the stories that circulated through the squadron, Rebecca had been flying as co-pilot in an F-15E Strike Eagle during a training mission over the Nevada desert when something went catastrophically wrong. The aircraft had suffered a critical malfunction, and while Rebecca had successfully ejected to safety, her pilot and close friend Captain Marcus "Hawk" Rodriguez had died in the crash. The official accident report was classified, but rumors filled the gaps with devastating speculation. Some pilots whispered that Rebecca had panicked and ejected prematurely, abandoning Marcus when she should have stayed to help troubleshoot the emergency. Others suggested she had been too inexperienced to handle the crisis and had bailed out while Marcus was still trying to save the aircraft. The most damaging rumor, whispered primarily by male pilots who resented women in combat roles, was that Rebecca had frozen under pressure and ejected out of cowardice, leaving Marcus to die alone because she was too scared to fight for their lives. Major Stephen Blake, the squadron operations officer at Edwards, had made his opinion clear during Rebecca's first week at the base. Thompson, he'd said loud enough for other pilots to hear, "I don't know what happened up there in Nevada, but I do know that real pilots don't abandon their wingmen. You better prove you belong in this cockpit, because right now all I see is someone who runs when things get tough." The harassment was systematic and cruel. Rebecca's flight gear would disappear from her locker, forcing her to use backup equipment during critical training missions. Her aircraft assignments were always the oldest, least reliable jets in the squadron. Other pilots would forget to include her in safety briefings or tactical discussions, then criticize her for being unprepared. Captain Lisa Martinez, one of only 3 female pilots in the squadron, refused to acknowledge Rebecca's existence. "I won't be associated with someone who gives women pilots a bad name," she told other aviators. "We work twice as hard to earn respect, and she's undermining all of us." The psychological warfare extended beyond professional sabotage. Rebecca's quarters were repeatedly vandalized with messages like "coward" and "pilot killer" spray-painted on her door. Anonymous notes were left on her car windshield questioning her courage, her competence, and her right to wear the uniform. Most devastating were the social media campaigns that some pilots waged against her. Photos of Rebecca were posted in pilot group chats with captions like, "What a coward looks like," and "This is why women don't belong in combat aircraft." The images and comments spread throughout the military aviation community, making Rebecca infamous among pilots who had never met her, but believed they knew her story. But Rebecca endured it all in complete silence. She never defended herself, never explained what had really happened during that fatal training mission, never fought back against the narrative that painted her as a selfish pilot who had saved herself while letting her partner die. Hit that like button if you're already sensing that this story isn't what it appears to be, because what really happened in that cockpit over Nevada was about to change everything. The truth about the F-15E crash was locked away in classified accident investigation files that painted a picture of heroism so extraordinary that it had to remain secret to protect ongoing military operations. The training mission had been a cover for testing experimental avionics equipment that was critical to next-generation fighter aircraft development. Rebecca and Marcus had been flying a modified F-15E equipped with prototype radar and targeting systems worth over $50 million. The equipment was so advanced and classified that the aircraft carried self-destruct charges designed to prevent the technology from falling into enemy hands if the plane crashed in hostile territory. 30 minutes into the flight, a catastrophic electrical fire had erupted in the avionics bay, directly behind Marcus's ejection seat. The fire was spreading rapidly toward the fuel lines, creating an explosion hazard that would likely destroy the aircraft within minutes. Standard protocol called for immediate ejection by both crew members, but the experimental equipment's self-destruct system had malfunctioned. If the aircraft crashed with the prototype technology intact, it would compromise years of classified research and give foreign intelligence agencies access to America's most advanced military secrets. Marcus made the decision to stay with the aircraft and attempt a controlled crash that would trigger the self-destruct charges manually. But the electrical fire had damaged his ejection seat's firing mechanism, trapping him in the cockpit while flames spread around his position. "Blaze, you need to get out now," Marcus had radioed, his voice calm despite the fire that was beginning to fill the cockpit with toxic smoke. "The ejection sequence is armed. I can trigger it in 30 seconds. Rebecca's response would haunt her for the rest of her life. "I'm not leaving you, Hawk. We're going to get you out of that seat." For the next 4 minutes and 23 seconds, while their aircraft screamed toward the desert at over 300 miles per hour, Rebecca had fought desperately to free Marcus from his malfunctioning ejection seat. She had unbuckled herself and crawled back to his position, working with bare hands to disconnect the damaged firing mechanism while flames licked at her flight suit. The cockpit voice recorder captured every second of her struggle, every desperate attempt to save her friend's life. Every moment she chose to risk death rather than abandon her wingman. "Rebecca, get out!" Marcus had screamed as the fire reached critical temperatures. "The fuel lines are going to blow. Save yourself." "Not without you," she had replied, her voice steady despite the hell surrounding them. "I'm not leaving without you." Rebecca had finally managed to disconnect Marcus's damaged ejection seat when the aircraft's fuel system exploded, blowing both crew members out of the disintegrating fighter jet. Marcus's seat fired correctly, but the explosion had thrown him clear of the aircraft at the wrong angle and altitude. His parachute deployed, but he hit the ground too hard and too fast. Rebecca's ejection had come 3 seconds later, launched by the blast rather than her own decision to abandon the aircraft. She landed safely because Marcus had insisted she prepare her own ejection sequence first, ensuring her survival even as his own became impossible. What would you do if you had to choose between following orders to save classified technology and staying to rescue your trapped wingman? Would you prioritize national security or the life of your closest friend? The investigation that followed the crash revealed details that would have made Rebecca a national hero if they could have been made public. The cockpit voice recorder proved that she had spent over 4 minutes in a burning aircraft trying to save Marcus's life, refusing multiple direct orders to eject and save herself. The flight data recorder showed that Rebecca had succeeded in triggering the manual self-destruct sequence for the classified equipment, protecting $50 million worth of military secrets while simultaneously fighting to free her trapped co-pilot. Most remarkably, the evidence proved that Marcus Rodriguez would have died regardless of Rebecca's actions. The electrical fire that trapped him in his ejection seat had also damaged his parachute system. Even if Rebecca had managed to free him earlier, his parachute was too compromised to ensure a safe landing. But all of this information was classified at the highest levels of government. The experimental equipment they had been testing was so sensitive that even acknowledging its existence would compromise national security. Rebecca was prohibited from discussing any details of the mission, the crash, or her actions during the emergency. She was forced to accept transfer to Edwards Air Force Base with an incomplete service record that made her look like a pilot who had abandoned her wingman during a routine training accident. She couldn't defend herself without violating federal law and betraying military secrets that were vital to American defense. For 6 months, Rebecca Thompson had endured professional destruction and personal humiliation while being legally prohibited from speaking the truth that would vindicate her actions. The revelation that would change everything came during a routine medical examination when base flight surgeon Dr. Patricia Kim noticed something unusual on Rebecca's right shoulder blade. During the standard physical required for all pilots, Dr. Kim observed what appeared to be a fresh tattoo hidden beneath Rebecca's regulation undershirt. Military regulations required documentation of all tattoos, and this one wasn't in Rebecca's medical file. "Lieutenant Thompson," Dr. Kim said carefully, "I need to document this tattoo for your medical records. Could you show me the full design?" Rebecca hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the request. "Ma'am, it's personal. It's not visible in uniform, so I didn't think it needed to be reported." "I understand, but regulations require complete documentation. I need to see it and photograph it for your file." When Rebecca reluctantly removed her shirt, Dr. Kim saw something that made her hands shake as she reached for her camera. Tattooed across Rebecca's right shoulder blade was a detailed portrait of Marcus Rodriguez in his flight gear, surrounded by the dates of his birth and death, with words that told the true story of their final mission. "I tried to bring you home, brother. I'll carry you with me always." Blaze! But beneath the portrait was something even more significant. A detailed diagram of an F-15E ejection seat mechanism with specific technical modifications that Dr. Kim recognized from classified aircraft systems manuals. Dr. Kim had served as a flight surgeon for 12 years and held security clearances that allowed her to review accident investigation files. She understood immediately that Rebecca's tattoo contained technical details that only someone with intimate knowledge of experimental aircraft systems would know. More importantly, the tattoo proved that Rebecca had been close enough to the ejection seat mechanism to memorize its exact configuration, evidence that she had been working desperately to repair it rather than fleeing the aircraft. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next, because what Dr. Kim discovered in the classified accident files would expose a cover-up that reached the highest levels of military command. Dr. Kim's security clearance allowed her to request Rebecca's complete medical and service records, including classified accident investigation files that most base personnel couldn't access. What she found in those files made her physically ill. The cockpit voice recorder transcripts revealed over 4 minutes of Rebecca Thompson risking her life to save Marcus Rodriguez, while he begged her to save herself. The flight data showed that she had manually triggered the destruction of $50 million worth of classified equipment while simultaneously attempting a rescue that any reasonable person would have known was probably impossible. Most damaging to the Air Force's reputation was evidence that senior officers had deliberately allowed false rumors about Rebecca's cowardice to spread throughout the pilot community. They had chosen to destroy her reputation rather than reveal classified details that would have proven her heroism. The cover-up had been orchestrated by Brigadier General Robert Hayes, who oversaw the experimental aircraft program. Hayes had determined that protecting the classified nature of the test mission was more important than protecting the reputation of a junior pilot. He had actively discouraged any investigation into the rumors surrounding Rebecca's conduct, allowing her to be scapegoated to maintain operational security. Dr. Kim's discovery triggered a chain of events that would rock the Air Force to its core. She immediately contacted Colonel Sarah Martinez, the base commander, with her findings, and demanded a complete review of Rebecca's case. Colonel Martinez, herself a former test pilot, was horrified by what the investigation revealed. She had been told that Rebecca Thompson was a pilot with performance issues who had been transferred to Edwards for additional training. She had no idea that Rebecca was actually a hero whose reputation had been deliberately destroyed to protect classified operations. The base commander immediately ordered all harassment of Rebecca to cease and launched a formal investigation into the treatment she had received from squadron personnel. What that investigation revealed was a pattern of institutional cruelty that went far beyond normal military hazing. Major Blake, who had led the campaign of harassment against Rebecca, was found to have violated multiple Air Force regulations regarding treatment of transferred personnel. He had actively encouraged other pilots to exclude Rebecca from training activities and had used his position to sabotage her career advancement. Captain Martinez and other female pilots who had shunned Rebecca were forced to confront the devastating truth that they had participated in destroying a fellow aviator whose courage exceeded anything they had ever displayed. Most shocking was the discovery that several pilots had been filming Rebecca's humiliation and sharing the videos on social media platforms, turning her suffering into entertainment for thousands of military personnel who believed they were watching a coward get her deserved punishment. The Air Force faced a choice: continue the cover-up and allow an innocent pilot to suffer indefinitely, or reveal enough classified information to restore Rebecca's reputation and hold accountable the people who had tormented her. General Patricia Santos, the Air Force Chief of Staff, made the decision to partially declassify Rebecca's accident investigation file and release a statement that would vindicate her actions without compromising national security. What do you think the Air Force owes to a pilot who sacrificed her reputation to protect military secrets while being tortured by the very institution she served with distinction? The press conference that followed General Santos's decision made national headlines. Standing at a Pentagon podium, the Air Force Chief of Staff announced that First Lieutenant Rebecca Thompson was being awarded the Air Force Cross for extraordinary heroism during a classified test mission that had saved vital military technology and demonstrated courage above and beyond the call of duty. Lieutenant Thompson's actions during a catastrophic aircraft emergency represent the finest traditions of military aviation, General Santos announced. She risked her own life repeatedly to save both her fellow airmen and classified technology vital to national defense. Her courage, skill, and dedication under the most extreme circumstances make her a credit to the United States Air Force. The sanitized version of events released to the media revealed that Rebecca had remained in a burning aircraft for over 4 minutes, attempting to rescue her co-pilot, and had successfully protected classified military equipment during the emergency. While specific details remain classified, the Air Force made it clear that Rebecca had acted heroically throughout the crisis. But the damage to Rebecca's mental health and career was already done. The woman who received the Air Force Cross was not the same confident pilot who had entered that burning cockpit 6 months earlier. The constant harassment, social isolation, and professional sabotage had taken a devastating psychological toll. Rebecca had developed severe anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress that made flying increasingly difficult. The joy she had once found in aviation had been replaced by a constant fear that her fellow pilots were waiting for her to fail. When reporters tried to interview the newly decorated hero, they discovered something that shocked the military community. Rebecca Thompson had submitted her resignation from the Air Force the same day she received the Air Force Cross. Her resignation letter, which was eventually leaked to the media, revealed the true cost of institutional betrayal. General Santos, I appreciate the Air Force's recognition of my actions, but I can no longer serve alongside people who spent 6 months trying to destroy me for doing exactly what I was trained to do. I stayed in that burning cockpit because that's what pilots do for each other. I protected classified information because that's what patriots do for their country. I endured months of harassment and humiliation because I believed the Air Force would eventually recognize the truth. I was wrong. The institution I loved turned me into a cautionary tale and a social media punchline. Marcus Rodriguez died trying to protect American military secrets. I've spent 6 months dying a little more each day, trying to protect my own reputation from the very people who should have been protecting me. I can't fly for an organization that destroys its heroes to protect its bureaucrats. Respectfully, Rebecca Thompson. The scandal that followed Rebecca's resignation led to congressional hearings, media investigations, and a complete overhaul of Air Force policies regarding classified personnel. Major Blake was court-martialed and dismissed from service. General Hayes faced congressional testimony about his role in the cover-up. Dozens of personnel at Edwards Air Force Base received disciplinary action for participating in the systematic harassment of a decorated war hero. But all the justice in the world couldn't bring Rebecca Thompson back to the cockpit she had loved since childhood, or restore the trust she had lost in the institution that had failed her so completely. 3 months after leaving the Air Force, Rebecca was found by a documentary filmmaker who had been investigating the institutional problems that drove decorated veterans away from military service. She was working as a civilian flight instructor at a small airport in rural Wyoming, teaching basic aviation skills to local teenagers and helping military veterans transition to civilian careers. The confident fighter pilot who had once commanded cutting-edge military aircraft was now quietly rebuilding her relationship with flying, one small plane at a time. Flying used to be about serving something bigger than myself, Rebecca told the filmmaker during their only interview. Now it's about remembering why I fell in love with aviation before the Air Force taught me that heroism can be a punishment and survival can be a crime. The flight school Rebecca had joined specialized in helping veterans who had been damaged by their military service, pilots with PTSD, mechanics who had been wrongfully discharged, air crew whose careers had been destroyed by institutional failures. She had found a community of people who understood that military service could be both an honor and a trauma. But the most meaningful part of Rebecca's new life was a weekly support group she led for military personnel who had been scapegoated or blamed for tragedies beyond their control. Every Thursday evening, she explained, we have people come here who survived when others didn't, who made impossible decisions under unimaginable pressure, who were punished for being human in inhuman situations. They learn that survival doesn't require guilt, that heroism doesn't guarantee recognition, and that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is walk away from institutions that have forgotten their own values. When the filmmaker asked Rebecca about the tattoo that had finally revealed the truth about her service, she pulled back her shirt to show Marcus Rodriguez's portrait, now accompanied by the names and dates of 17 other military personnel who had died in classified operations. This tattoo saved my reputation, she said quietly, but it couldn't save my faith in the system. Marcus died protecting military secrets, and I spent 6 months dying a little more each day protecting the institution that killed him. Now I protect something different. I protect people who need to know that their trauma matters. Their service counted, and their survival was not a betrayal of the people who didn't make it home. The documentary ended with Rebecca walking toward a small Cessna where a young veteran was preparing for his first civilian flight lesson. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had rediscovered their purpose outside the institution that had nearly destroyed them. Rebecca Thompson had been called a coward for surviving when her wingman died, tortured for 6 months by people who didn't know she had tried to die saving him, and driven from the Air Force when the truth finally came out. But in the end, she had found something more valuable than military rank or institutional approval. She had found a way to keep flying while helping other survivors understand that heroism doesn't always look like the movies. And sometimes the greatest act of service is choosing to live with the guilt of surviving when others couldn't. If this story changed how you think about survivors' guilt and institutional betrayal, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to understand that surviving trauma doesn't make you weak or selfish. Leave a comment telling me about someone you know who carried blame for tragedies that weren't their fault. And turn on notifications because stories like Rebecca's remind us that sometimes the people who suffer the most are the ones who tried the hardest to save others, and their pain deserves recognition instead of judgment.